Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea King, and I did my topic on women living in poverty who are trying to establish their career identity. So, first, we're going to go in and talk about a little bit about early adulthood. The developmental stages for early adulthood ranges from the ages of 24 to 34 years old. The developmental tasks are exploring intimate relationships, cohabitation or marriage, starting a family, finding an occupation, and belonging to a social group. To talk about a little bit about the picture on the left, it is Maslow's hierarchy of needs that is also in our books. You can find it on page 435. And it's basically just talking about how human beings are always in a state of striving. And reach into that self-actualization because it's a powerful growth-oriented motive that sits atop of the pyramid of needs. To explain it, it starts off with the primary human motives concerning the physiological needs, hunger, thirst, the need for sleep, and then it goes into safety, security, and the need to find protection. And then there's level for one is motivated to enhance and protect self-esteem, and then finally you are meeting those needs that can be met and sustained, and then the person's direct energy to actual self-actualization. um, so that explains some of the developmental stages. We are going to break down the first developmental task of exploring intimate relationships. And the period of early adulthood is a time when men and women explore the possibility of forming relationships that combine emotional closeness, shared interests, a shared vision of the future, and sexual intimacy. Some young adults engage in a form of serial monogamy, or others find a same sex partner with whom they can make a long term commitment, even though formal marriage is not possible because of certain laws restricting marriage. It's specifically to a man and to a woman. So the second developmental task is cohabitation, and in comparison, it has some of the same factors and qualities as heterosexual couples. There are 6 types of cohabitating relationships that are described when living together. That is marginal, prelude to marriage, stage in a marriage process, alternative to being single, alternative to marriage, and indistinguishable for marriage. And just to give a little background about it, marginal cohabitating is infrequent, its duration is short, and few children are born within this relationship because the cultural norms strongly discourage this type of union. Prelude to marriage, in the face of high divorce rates, cohabitating may be viewed as a way for couples to test the relationships prior to marriage. Stage in the marriage process, couples in this type of relationship may see disadvantages to marrying immediately, but they do intend to marry sometime during the line. Also, childbearing is, in the context of this relationship, it's more common because the partners are expected to marry. Alternative to being single, couples tend to want to postpone marriage and family formation because they think they're too young to marry. These couples are more likely single dating couples than like married couples. Alternative to marriage, couples view cohabitating as an alternative to marriage. These relationships are often established in the context of cultural support for children born outside the bonds of marriage. And then lastly, indistinguishable from marriage. Because of the cultural acceptability of unmarried couples and institutional support for all parents, couples consider cohabitation versus marriage on the pragmatic grounds. These relationships are not a conscious alternative to marriage based on attitudes or values. A little more on cohabitation. Um, Relationships between partners of the same sex have the same dynamics that influence the formation of close relationships amongst heterosexual couples. Um, Gay men and lesbians are diverse in regards to interests, talents, educational backgrounds, family backgrounds, and careers, and etc. Um, However, homosexual couples do face unique challenges that include establishing a relationship in secrecy, the disapproval from the family, as well as a lack of recognition of their union. Moving on to the third developmental task of starting a family, we're going to first talk about childbearing and how those decisions are made from personal family goals and commitments. Um, it also factors that include childbearing depends on religious beliefs, career aspirations, ideals about family life, social expectations in the family, um, and culture all contribute to a couple's commitment to starting a family and bearing children. Uh, we also, another thing about starting a family are problems and adjustment during pregnancy and childbearing. Um, Most women are healthy and happy about being pregnant. There is growing concerns about how to treat mood disorders among women during pregnancy and even after pregnancies. Um, there are also therapeutic drugs for women who challenge with anxiety or depression during pregnancies. But however, there are risks of potential harm to the fetus, so you have to be careful during that. The dual roles of intimate partner and parent. We can explain that in contrast of the elation that usually accompanies anticipation of the preparation for the newborn, the arrival of the first child often brings a period of stress to the relationship. It has a lot to do with couples adapting to the transition into parenthood. There is also non-marital childbearing. In fact, over 1.6 million babies were born to women in the United States who were not married. So normally these are marriage relationships from lesbian or cohabitating relationships, just making that decision to start a family without a partner. And then there are adoptions, which is alternative to childbearing for individuals who want to start a family and expand their family. However, adoption is relatively rare, with fewer than 1.5% of married women having ever adopting a child. The developmental test, the fourth one of occupation, finding a career. Here's just a simple chart of the different steps from the different stages for careers: exploration, establishment, maintenance, and disengagement. And it just explains the years on the jobs, typical age, relationships to other employees, activities, and developmental tasks, just so you could get a feel of how finding a career normally operates during that time. The fifth is the social group and forming relationships in neighborhoods or at work help balance out family and work. Social networking include Facebook and Twitter, and this is just a way for that early adults to come together and communicate with one another, just trying to relieve some stress about what's going on in the home, not having to worry about work. So building that connection with other people can help relieve the stress, anxiety, and just balance those out. The psychosocial crisis of early adulthood is intimacy versus isolation. So we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about both intimacy and isolation. Around the ages 24 to 34 years old, the basic conflict in young adults is intimacy versus isolation. The important event is parenting, and the important relationships are lovers, friends, and work and connections. In this stage, the individual must develop intimate relationships through work and social life. Failure to make such connections can lead to promiscuity, exclusivity, and isolation. Intimacy is defined as the ability to experience an open, supportive, tender relationship with another person without fear of losing one's own identity in the process. There are cognitive components to this as well as affective components. Interaction styles of women and men. Men interact less intimately than women. They generally demonstrate more competitiveness, less agreement, and lower levels of self-disclosure than women. However, levels of self-disclosures are not related to loneliness for men as they are for women. And then there's also intimacy in the workplace, which is common for establishment of intimacy is the work setting. The affiliation of close friendships are likely to develop among coworkers. And isolation is the feeling of being unable to experience shared or belonging. Themes of isolation include loneliness and depression. Feelings of loneliness can be separated into three categories, which is transient, situational, and chronic. Transient loneliness lasts a short time and passes as when you hear a song or an expression that reminds you of someone or a loved one who is far away. Situational loneliness accompanies a sudden loss or move to a new city. And then chronic loneliness lasts a long time and cannot be linked to a specific stressor. Chronically lonely people may have an average number of social contacts and people who they interact with. Explaining depression. Depression is a worldwide health issue normally associated with diseases of arthritis, asthma, or diabetes. So these worsens a person's health conditions. The central process of early adulthood development, is mutuality among peers, and that refers to the empathic awareness of one another, understanding of self and others, as well as the ability of willingness to regulate one's needs. The prime adaptive ego is love. Love is an emotion characterized by a capacity for mutuality that transcends childhood dependency. I believe this is important because as building those relationships and wanting to have a family and starting a family, bearing children, love is a very important emotion that is that children need because they depend on that feeling, that need, that nurture. Core pathology, exclusivity, is the shutting out of others. An example would be sexual exclusivity tends to be valued in monogamous relationships, sexual relationships, and in order to ensure that the resources will be directed toward her offsprings. So moving into my actual topic is struggles of monetary deficiency among women and poverty population. Over 43 million people in the United States lived with incomes below the poverty level, representing 14.3% of the U.S. population and reaching the highest rate since 1994. More than 16 million of those women were aged 18 and older. 13.9% of those was the adult female population. Talking about poverty, poverty varies with age, race, education, and ethnicity. Among women aged 25 years and older, 31% of those were without a high school diploma, were living in poverty, compared to 14.4% of those with the high school diploma, or equivalent to. 10.7% of those were some college, and 4.3% of those had a bachelor's degree or higher. In 2009, women and families, a group of at least two people related by birth, marriage, or adoption, and residing together, experience higher rates of poverty than men and families. Women in the labor force. Labor force participation among women is lower when children are younger and when the mother is married. In 2009, labor force participation ranged from 59.8% among married mothers with children under 3 years of age to 81.6% among unmarried or separated mothers with children aged 6 through 17 years old. During this year of 2009, the median weekly earnings of full-time workers aged 25 and older was $186 less for women than men, versus $687 versus $873. So right there you can see the difference between women working versus men. Although earnings rise dramatically with increasing education, the gender gap in earnings persists. So there's still that difference based on gender. Female full-time workers earn about 75 cents for every dollar earned by male full-time workers at every level of education. Measuring poverty, there's two that I found was absolute measure of poverty and relative income poverty measures. Absolute measure of poverty are people living before a certain threshold, and relative income poverty measures income is below the average income. Right here is a chart, people and families in poverty by selected characteristics. This was the more recent one that I could have found, and these are between the year 2003 and 2004. And it just breaks down different characteristics based on race, age, nativity, region, work experience, families, the type of families. It could be married couple, female householder, no husband present, or male householder, no wife present. And it's just simply just to show the difference between the different households below poverty, and then the changes in poverty between the different years of 2003 and 2004. There's also poverty by family structure. Mother-only households are twice as likely to be in poverty than father-only households. It is about 6 times as likely to be in poverty than married couple. I believe this has a lot to do with one, the big gender gap difference of money work, how women are paid versus men, as well as women being stay-at-home moms trying to take care of the children and household duties as well as working, whereas men are more known to be the breadwinners and the provider for the household. However, times are changing where men are actually doing both. However, but men are still getting paid more than women. Why are women more likely to live in poverty? Because of the labor market earnings transfer from their families and transfer payments or tax credits from the government. Here is a pie chart that just simply talks about unmarried women in poverty, and this is the year of 2008, and it just shows the different percentages of ages of women living in poverty who are not married. To break each one down, labor market earnings In divorce, the custody of children is more likely to go to the women, and so even if earning the same income, women with more children are more likely to fall under the threshold. Women have lower earnings than men, which I've stated before, more likely to work part-time because they're more tend to also have children, so they have to be able to tend to them as well. So working a full-time job just doesn't work with the schedule. More than a way from workplace to take care of children, so human capital more likely to have depreciated. Transfers from their families. Most divorces do not lead to large cash divorce settlements. Most women do not get alimony, and child support is generally low and many times still remains uncollected. Transfer payments or tax credits from the government. As mentioned before, the welfare programs in the U.S. has had an impact on the U.S. family structure, which I talked about previously. Some counseling interventions include trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a psychosocial treatment model designed to treat post-traumatic stress. This could be beneficial to women who are really just stressed or depressed about just living in poverty, trying to overcome working as well as doing household duties. There is person-centered therapy, which is a non-directive empathic approach that empowers and motivates the client in a therapeutic process. So just a way for them to be able to take back control of their lives in a positive way. There are also anti-poverty networks, and it is an organization made up of individuals who have lived experience of poverty. It is a nonprofit and community-based organization, and it just helps them. It just is a program or a network that helps those living in poverty. There are also free mental counseling clinics, and they are able to work with people who seem to be depressed, bipolar, experience some anxiety, or other mood disorders, which is common with women living in poverty, not even just women, people in poverty in general. So those are some things that could help with that. I've also looked at some welfare programs in the U.S., and there is AFDC, Aid to Families with Dependent Children, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, Supplemental Security Income, Women, Infants, and Children, and then there's Medicaid. So these are just a few of the programs that can help those living in poverty that may need some assistance. And to sum it up, some psychosocial crisis resolution. Early adulthood can be very stressful when it comes to finding out where one belongs with relationships, homosexual relationship, heterosexual relationships, women struggling, providing for children, paying bills, jobs that are keeping women from working to their full potential because it's based on men. So that being labeled living in poverty is just stressful for single mothers, and also a woman who is married in a household. So using these welfare programs and giving these free mental counseling clinics and the other previous counseling interventions that I've mentioned and therapy session will just reduce those stress levels for women to live a more positive life. Thank you.